Cuban Missile Crisis was a 13-day period where many American officials and people were worried that we would go into a nuclear war with the Soviets. It started when we sent a spy plane into Cuba and we saw that the Soviets were constructing missile silos in Cuba and we got scared. Okay, I did not explain why we sent the spy planes in there in the first place, but I'm going to explain real quick. So before this whole Cuban Missile Crisis, we had the Bay of Pigs and the invasion of Cuba, and that ended horribly, bad. And so we didn't trust them after that, so that's why we sent in those spy planes to look after them. Keep going. JFK did not know what to do in this scenario. He thought about trying to negotiate more with the Soviets, but that would have made America seem weak. Another thought was to try to invade and bomb parts of Cuba, but that probably would have sent us into a nuclear war. What we ended up doing was setting up a naval blockade outside of Cuba so that the Soviet ships could not get into Cuba, and that worked. Khrushchev wasn't happy with the naval blockade and he wanted to negotiate with Kennedy. He said that if America would dismantle their missiles in Turkey and Italy and promise to not invade Cuba, then that the Soviets would destroy their missiles in Cuba and not build anymore. I'm here with Miss Rand and I'll be interviewing her about the Cuban Missile Crisis. So how old were you during the Cuban Missile Crisis and what are your thoughts on it?
I was 14 years old and I was a freshman at Atkinson High School. I just vaguely remember some things about it, but I know that we were all scared about it. And I am very sure that my history teacher talked about it because she was very much into world events.
And do you have a story about the Cuban Missile Crisis at all?
Well, one thing I remember is, I think it was 1959, when Khrushchev visited a farm in Iowa, and I'm not sure of the circumstances, but there was a particular farmer, I think, that corresponded with Khrushchev, and he came to visit this farm. Khrushchev was interested in farming, and I just thought it odd that some man would come to the United States from Russia and be as pleasant as could be. I do know about some neighbors who built underground shelters after this event.
Yeah, I'd say underground shelters played a big part in the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes.
Fallout shelters were really popular back then with small homes because, again, they were scared that during that time we would go into a nuclear war. Fallout shelters were packed full of beds, canned food so that they would last a long time down there, thick cement walls to prevent radiation from getting inside, and they were also built very deep underground to also prevent radiation from getting inside.
There's enough space here for a couple people to live in underneath the surface should they need to. Ooh.
I hope we'll secure the money we requested. As you know, within the last 10 days, I've sent up a supplemental appropriation request for around $35 million for the distribution of food throughout the country, which would be available in case of an attack. Under the program, which we started some months ago, nearly 60 million shelters have been identified. We want to have food in them and other necessities, and I'm hopeful that the Congress will implement the program.
There were missile silos around Lincoln, Nebraska.
Really?
Yes, there were.
American or Soviet?
American. That's why Nebraska could have been one of those targets.
Okay. One thing I want to say is the Americans back then had missile silos in Turkey and Italy way before the Soviets even put their missiles in Cuba. So I'm pretty sure the reason why they put those in there was because that we did it and they were worried that we were going to send an attack to them from there. So they said, hey, we're going to do the same. When Kennedy and Khrushchev finally came to an agreement, the Limited Test Ban Treaty was signed and Great Britain signed it too. This agreement said that we cannot test nuclear weapons above ground, which could impact humans, wildlife, and other species, but we could test them underground, and here's a video of a nuclear testing site happening underground. So to summarize everything, the Cuban Missile Crisis played an important part in American history because we could have almost went to a nuclear war with the Soviets. Now, this is also important to other parts of the world because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Limited Test Treaty was made, and that helped to reduce the amount of nuclear testing to help save the human population and everything, but it also helped us to prevent from testing nuclear sites a whole lot so we wouldn't be going into a nuclear war. Because, hey, let's be honest, no one wants to live in a nuclear fallout.